Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Terence Crawford and Canelo. The question is, did Canelo throw the fight for $150 million? Now, I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's the case. But there are some fans who believe that Canelo threw the fight. They're taking a look at Canelo's low punch output, and they're asking themselves, how in the world does a guy like Terence Crawford make an outstanding fighter like Canelo not let his hands go? So you see, we need to open up that conversation a bit, because I am very surprised at so many videos circulating to suggest Crawford didn't possess the skill set, the intelligence, and overall wasn't the caliber of fighter who could go and get a win against a guy like Canelo. Now, to that I say, in the most respectful way, as you hold your horses, stop taking it to the stupid. Terence Crawford is the truth, but before we unpack whether Canelo threw the fight or if Crawford was simply the superior fighter, gotta take a look at some numbers, you know what I'm saying? The fans keep pointing out the punch output. Hood champion, look at the punch output. They said that's a key indicator that something was off. And I'm like, okay, I'll look at it. But we know Canelo ain't getting no younger. Canelo's only getting older. And I don't think Canelo is going to increase his activity rate in the next few fights. I think if anything, it'll remain the same or it'll dip even more. Unless he has someone in there who is afraid of him, which I doubt that is going to happen now. But what I will say, after some research, is Canelo's activity did drop to one of the lowest points of his career. So that's true. But let's do a little bit of a breakdown of recent fights compared with the Crawford numbers. And I think I can give us a little bit of insight of what the hell is going on here. Now, when Canelo fought Jermell Charlo, we know he dominated Jermell Charlo. Jermell Charlo didn't let his hands go, though. It's a big difference of why Canelo was able to put some work in. But anyway, he threw 480 punches over 12 rounds. So that's about 40 punches per round. That's a lot of punches per round. But it's not hard to do when you're in cruise control and you have somebody in front of you who's not letting their hands go. They're just running. Now, when Canelo fought John Ryder, he threw about 450, 30 punches less. But that's pretty consistent with his controlled pace, because Ryder was another one. He let his hands go at times, but for the most part, he was just there to be hit. He didn't move as much as Charlo, but he was there to be hit. Now, when he fought Golovkin in 2022, in the third fight, he threw about 500 punches. Now, he pushed the pace more in the late rounds against Golovkin. But again, Golovkin in the third fight, he just came back for that payday. Now, when he fought Bivol in 2022, now this is where the numbers start looking a little bit weird now. He threw 420. Now, remember, 450, 480 is kind of where he was cresting at. When he fought Bivol, he threw 420. Noticeably low. Fans criticize his output there. But the difference is, when he fought Charlo, he threw 480. Charlo didn't punch back. When he fought Ryder, he threw about 450. Ryder did punch more than Charlo. When he fought Bivol, Canelo threw 420, but Bivol was putting the bing-bings on him. So then you come now to where he fought a guy, Terence Crawford. And this is crazy, because now you talk about 100 punches over the whole fight, 100 punch drop, 300 to 320 punches total. That's about 25, 27 per round. Let me tell you something. That's the lowest activity of his modern career. So when you look at this statistically, fans aren't wrong. Canelo's activity dipped big time against Crawford compared to his last 5 fights. Whether that's evidence of a fix or just Crawford's brilliance is what we need to break down. But this is what I want to make sure that people understand. Canelo trained to throw 500 to 550 punches the whole fight, possibly up to 600 punches across 12 rounds. He worked so hard, so feverishly, so diligently in training camp that I was telling you the man was overtrained. You go on my page and look at my videos. Type in Canelo overtrained. You'll see the video. So I was reporting on what Canelo was doing in his training camp, what Crawford was doing. So Canelo peaked. But the other problem is, and Canelo thought this shit was funny. He likes to spar every day. He likes to fight every day in camp. Eddie Reynoso doesn't like that. So Eddie Reynoso will just walk away from Canelo. They'll disagree. And Canelo thinks it's funny. And Eddie Reynoso's like, no, this isn't what we should be doing. So I personally feel Canelo peaked. He was burnt out. I also feel he had his ass kicked in training camp. Beyond the point of being in optimal shape. I think he didn't enter the ring in optimal condition. I think he peaked in training camp. I think Eddie Reynoso knew he peaked. And Eddie Reynoso knew he pushed it too much. And it sounds like Canelo may have done it without the approval of Eddie Reynoso, and that's why there was a little bit of tension there. You even saw there was the video out there where they're in Canelo's camp, the little fight build up to Crawford. Crawford had some camera crews going out to his camp, but you could see there's a point where they talk about it in that video. So as far as there being a fix, look, the secret society is in full effect. I understand Canelo's punch output was low, but when you're overtrained and you burn out and your fatigue sets in early, you develop dead leg, your punch output's going to dip anyway. But when you have someone in front of you who's countering you, who's hitting you, who's making you miss, who's turning you, who's clinching, using angles, using pivots, using feints, foot feints, head feints, setting traps, and they have an expanded gas tank, and you start to deteriorate mentally, your punch output, based on what you normally average, the shit is going to dip. Okay? So that, to me, is the evidence to prove why Crawford won the fight, not because the shit was a fix. But as far as the fans' accusations, was the fight thrown for the money? Canelo doesn't chase greatness. He's a business. He's chasing money. He knew that if he fought David Benavidez, he would lose. But he wanted $250 million. They wouldn't give it to him. So then he wanted to fight Jake Paul for $100 million. Was going to go forward. Turk Al-Sheikh broke that up and said, okay, this man wants money to fight. So bad that he'll go fight Jake Paul. And let me be honest with you. How many of y'all think Jake Paul would have beat Canelo if they fought? You think that one punch shit Canelo's throwing at 5'8" with a 70-inch reach, you think that would have worked against a 6'2" Jake Paul with like a 76-inch reach? And Jake Paul can crack, and Canelo's there to be hit. All right, so remember, I'm not saying Jake Paul will win, but what I'm telling you is, based on seeing how Canelo was getting hurt by Crawford, but Crawford again was hitting him with shots he didn't see, and Crawford can thump. But all I'm saying is maybe Canelo, he didn't want to lose to Benavidez. Maybe it's best that he took that $150 million to fight Crawford, knowing it was a risky fight, but to him it was worth the money. And he underestimated Crawford a little bit. Maybe he said, maybe now he's looking at saying it's better that I lost to Crawford than I lost to Jake Paul. Last thing we needed was for Jake Paul to fight Canelo, beat Canelo, and for Jake Paul to be out here talking about he's the face of boxing. Oh my God. Could you imagine if Jake Paul would have put the bing bings on Canelo? World would be coming to an end. But the bottom line is the $150 million payday is central to the conspiracy. People are looking at it and they're saying this man threw the fight. Now I'm telling you what I think. I already explained what I think happened. But fans are gonna still argue that Canelo didn't need this for legacy. They said his resume is already stacked. Countless fighters, big names, champions. They believe that Canelo was out here just calculating the risk. And fight Crawford, cash out big. If he loses, Canelo and Eddie Reynoso, they can blame it on Canelo's age, the wear and tear, from turned pro at 15, fighting pros, 8-ounce gloves, getting punched in the face since he was a little kid, weight cuts, overtraining. When you think about that, right, that's a whole lot of goddamn calculating and a whole lot of thought that has to go into taking a fight and figuring out how to take the fight, but building an excuse if you lose before even getting in the ring. But I just think Canelo has too much pride, man, to just throw a fight like that. But if you look at this view, you know, cash out big. If he loses, blame it on everything but Crawford being great. You know, Canelo's legacy, you know, wouldn't be destroyed by losing to, you know, Terence Crawford, who's prime undefeated pound for pound king. It's just Canelo may have a loss on his record, but his bank account would swell tremendously. So from the outside, it's not hard to see why people believe that maybe Canelo would have thrown the fight. But the modern fight game, look, the modern fight game is fueled by money. Not many fighters are out here chasing greatness. So if they get an opportunity to make unimaginable paydays, they're going to take it. But I just think Canelo chasing the money, but I think he's also pursuing greatness, but money before the greatness, where Crawford is greatness before the money. And that's a big difference. Because when you put greatness before the money, that means you're still busting your ass in training camp. But when you put the money before the greatness, that means you're probably going hard in training camp, but you ain't necessarily busting your ass. And you're definitely not going to peak during training camp. Crawford and his team was smart to monitor everything with his training camp and to control it to make sure Crawford peaked on fight night, and that's what you saw. But I just feel if you take a look at it, Floyd Mayweather taught fighters that protecting the bag is as important as protecting the legacy. Canelo may have looked at his fight not as a must-win, and that's what Crawford looked at it. That was a must-win for Crawford. For Canelo, it wasn't a must-win. It was a must-collect payday. And that's the biggest difference here. Crawford was must-win. Canelo was must-collect. The problem with this theory is that Canelo's always been a competitor with pride. Fighting for Mexico, fighting for his family. And also, man, being the little red-haired kid with freckles on his face that they call cheesehead back in Guadalajara, Jalisco. He still got that shit in him. So you just can't make me believe that he got to a point to where he was like, I'm cool with losing in sparring. I'm cool with losing in the ring. I'm cool with losing the respect of the boxing fans, fellow countrymen, the other boxers who came before me from Mexico. I'm cool with coming out here and doing something that they've never done and not fighting and giving 100% of what I had and taking a risk and possibly going out on my shield. Like, it just doesn't. Those aren't indicators of someone who has always been someone to fight with pride. Canelo's always been a competitor with pride. So, I don't know. Even the amount of sparring that he did, Canelo doesn't even like losing in sparring. So, why would he throw that shit away? He's one of the few fighters that had an aura of invincibility all the way up until he fought Crawford. He was winning fights before he even got in the ring. But you know, there's some Mexican fans right now who are saying, yo, he has money in abundance and he doesn't look like the killer that he used to look like. And some are glad that he lost, but there's still some who are saying, nah, we need to continue debating this shit because they feel that he just took the money. And I think that's horrible. But they can say what they say, but there's a case for Crawford's superiority. And that's really what I think the conversation should surround. Crawford's superiority, that's the other side of the arguments. And fans and analysts, there are some, like me, I'm going to point out everything. Because, no discussion's off the table with me. It's just a conversation. But we need to point to Crawford's sheer brilliance. Because that's what he and his team showed in that ring when he fought Canelo. All this shit about Canelo throwing the fight. What about Crawford's timing? What about Crawford's footwork? What about his... If he wanted to, he could have switched hit. Maybe the fact that Canelo was in there with Crawford just waiting for him to switch hit was taking up some of his processing time. You know what I'm saying? And because he's not thinking Crawford's going to do something that Crawford never did. Any of you guys ever been waiting? Somebody say they're coming through or going to pick you up and take you somewhere. You're waiting for a ride. And you're waiting and waiting and waiting. They said they're going to be there at 9 o'clock. Now it's 9:15, 9:30, 9:45. Then it never happens. You're like, yo, MFer, you could have done this, you could have done that, you could have been thinking about this, thinking about that. But same thing in the ring. Canelo is probably sitting there waiting for Crawford to switch because he knows he can, and Crawford didn't do it. But anyway, I think people just need to understand Crawford has always had, and it showed Saturday, the ability to make great fighters look ordinary. Like the shit's well documented, you know what I'm saying? Look what he did to Spence. Everybody wants to talk about Spence. So I think that's a good example. Cut him down with surgical precision. Some say Spence didn't look 100%. Even I kind of feel that way. But then you look at what he did to Canelo. Canelo didn't look 100%. Look what he did to Hank Lundy. Look what he did to Porter. What he did to Jose Benavidez Jr. Look what he did to everybody he fought. Crawford makes everybody look ordinary. So at this point, I'm not thinking that these fighters want 100%. I just think Crawford is special. And to me, that's all it is. And I think because of all those different intangibles that Crawford possesses and what he brought into the ring, he pushed Canelo into hesitation mode. And once Canelo started becoming a bit reluctant to let his hands go and shit, well, Crawford picked up on that. And he started to do the business. Crawford saw that if I continue to constantly feint this man, I'm going to freeze Canelo. And that's what happened. Every time Canelo tried to step in, Crawford was beating him to the punch with a jab or a counter. Body shots from Canelo, that's his bread and butter. And he was trying, man. But they were shut down by Crawford's lateral movement. Plus the few that Canelo threw, Crawford was catching him on his arms, on his elbows. So you just saw from all that, it made Canelo frustrated, man. And I think that frustration made Canelo gun shy, which led to his lowest punch output of his career. So that's exactly what happened. You know what I mean? So as far as this was a fix, this whole thing I just explained to you, man, it makes the fix argument weaker. If Canelo couldn't pull the trigger, it may not have been because he didn't want to, because he wanted to. You can see Canelo was hungry in there, boy. He was like, I got to land on this guy. I got to land on him. But the problem is Crawford never let him hit him. Crawford was able to up it. In every round, Crawford showed that he could up it. Canelo couldn't up it. So as far as continuing to push the debate, legacy versus money, I think at the heart of the debate for some people was Canelo fighting for glory? Was he fighting for his flag or fighting for the bag? Fans point out that Canelo focused on mega paydays. Ryder, Charlo, Plant, and now Crawford shows a clear shift from chasing the toughest fight to chasing the biggest checks. And I don't blame him because he's a business, and he's all about business. But I understand that it's like me, right? I like to go running about 5-6 days a week. 4 of those days, sometimes all 6, I run with my Magic weighted vest. It's a 25-pound weighted vest. But let me tell you something. When I run in that shit, it takes me about 53 minutes to run 7, 10, 60, maybe 6.5 minute miles. Yeah, because I run about 53 minutes, and I run quite a ways, right? But this is the thing: when I take off that weighted vest, it don't take me 53 minutes to run that distance that I normally travel. That shit takes me now it's taking me 42 minutes. So I shed 10 minutes off my time. Now, I did it just the other day. I was like, holy shit, I need to run further now. But what it sounds to me at Canelo, if I can make a comparison between Canelo's performances by fighting guys like Ryder, Charlo Plant, it's like he was no longer running with his weighted vest on. So the run became easier. But then he went in there to fight a guy like Crawford, and now he had to put on that weighted vest. And the shit was hard. So that being said, he shifted from pushing himself and testing himself to see how great he can be to just settling for convenience. And it's the same thing as when I'm running with that weighted vest. Pushing myself, trying to run that distance in 43 minutes with the weighted vest is the goal. But I take it off sometimes, and when I take it off now, I just breeze through the run. And I think Crawford's just been breezing through his fights, and then he ran into Crawford, and it is what it is. And he was getting the biggest checks, so it is what it is. But I just think even at 34 to 35 years old, we continue on that debate with years of, wars behind him, in and out the gym. I think, some view Crawford as both a big money fight and a safe loss. I really think some people see it that way. Respectable loss because Crawford and what he brings to the table, he can explain it to saying wear and tear and I'm old and whatever, and it won't be humiliating because most people feel that Crawford overall has a much better skill set. But it still doesn't necessarily equal a fix, okay? It may simply mean Canelo didn't prepare with the same hunger, or he was physically declining, or Crawford just had his number. That's why I say I think he just got used to running without a weighted vest on. The run became easy. Then when he had to put it back on, fighting a guy like Crawford, shit was rough. So, fight fix, was it real? I just think when you look at the way I broke this down, and in my opinion, I think I'm leaning the way of the fight wasn't fixed. Canelo's pride, his legacy in Mexican boxing, his career trajectory, all that suggests he wouldn't intentionally throw a fight for nobody. What I think it is, number one, is Crawford's skill set. Neutralized him. Just neutralize his offense, neutralize everything about Canelo. I do think the age and mileage, it just slowed his reflexes, but that's not Crawford's fault. Canelo chose to be in training camp and stupidly going to war, preparing for Crawford. That's dumb on his part. But he has had a lot of fights, a lot of wars, started at 15, so it's starting to show up. And the other thing, that $150 million probably gave him some comfort, meaning he didn't fight with the desperation of a man who had everything to lose. You look at those boys up there that fought in Times Square, Teofimo, Devin, Ryan, Ramirez, Barbosa, only Rolly was fighting to win. The rest of them, man, those paydays they were getting to fight in Times Square, that shit gave them comfort. And that's a fact. That's why they performed the way they did. You know what I'm saying? So, it may have looked suspicious to casual fans because the low punch output, but the truth is probably less conspiratorial and more tactical. You know what I'm saying? Crawford made Canelo look ordinary. Boom. That's what it is. So it is what it is, man. That's how I see it. Anything's possible, but that means you'd have to get Crawford to want to cooperate and be in on the fix. Which means that maybe in Crawford's next fight, he may be in on the fix where he has to throw the fight and take a loss to a Hamza Shiraz, to a Benavidez, to a Janibek Alam Kanuli, to somebody at 160 that maybe Turk Al-Sheikh wants him to lose to, or somebody at 168 or 175. And let me tell you something. Two guys in boxing who I just don't think would throw a fight, Canelo and Crawford. There are others I believe, but two that come to mind, I just don't think Canelo going to do that. And Crawford for sure I don't think would do that. No way. Anyway, Interesting conversation though. Y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans, all 7 continents. Back from my vacation. But we went up for a day for my son, his birthday. My youngest wanted to go fish. We went and fished. We had fun, but I gotta post a video. It's gonna blow your mind. Y'all see this shit. Anyway, y'all keep cool. I'm gonna try to put about 4 more videos out since I didn't do much yesterday. I'm in the breeze.